Good afternoon in Sweden, good morning on the East Coast, and good very early morning on the West Coast. Appreciate very much that you take the time and log into our first webinar for SIREUS. My name is Christer Bergman, and together with four trainees, we are working on the SIREUS project. We started the SIREUS project 1.5 years or nearly 2 years ago now. SIREUS is a collaboration project between SAC, Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, USA, and 13 Swedish universities. Our focus is on knowledge exchanging innovation, science, and entrepreneurships, and increased talent mobility for student and research between Sweden and USA. And here's the secret. SIREUS, in fact, means something. It means students, innovators, researchers, entrepreneurs between US and Sweden. So one of the topics we have done the last year is that we have defined our focused area in thematic areas. We have 5 thematic areas that we are focusing on. Is the digital transformation, green transition, life science, society and culture, and space technology. And if you haven't visited our website yet, please do so. There's a number of sub areas in the thematic areas, and we have a number of links. So all the Swedish universities, the members have put in links to specific projects or specific centers on that particular thematic area. We also go out because we also have 11 American affiliate universities, and I see some of you from them, and welcome to the webinar. American university will do the same, put in their links to the thematic areas. So the whole idea here is to build a community for researchers in specific thematic areas. So we could support, so if you are, for instance, working in battery technology, you should be able to find colleagues both in Sweden and US in that specific area. The purpose of the SIREUS Research Forum, which is a monthly, is to reach out to you guys, research community, trying to build the community, trying to listen to you. What do you want to learn? What do you want to learn more of, and what support can we give you? We have planned a number of SIREUS research forums, the webinar series starting today. We'll be talking about trends, topics, projects. But most important is that we want to create a added value to you as a researchers. I know it's a big scope, but at least we are trying to find. If you help us, we will help you when it comes to what do you want to listen into. The follow-on to the webinar series is we are focusing and planning to do workshops within a specific sub-thematic area. So you as a researcher can have a real useful information to find your colleagues in Sweden and US. Today's research forum is the first one, and we will hold those monthly. That's the plan, different topics. So if you have topics, you let us know, and there will be a survey after the webinar and emails you plenty of time to tell us what you want. We do have about 10 different topics that we have on the menu, and we just want to listen to you. What do you want to have more information about? During today's webinar, it's going to take about 45 minutes plus Q&A. There is a chat function. If you have questions during the presentation, just put in the chat and we will check the chat and then try to take up a couple of questions at the end. Another important thing is also we are recording this webinar, and we'll edit it, and then we'll put it on the YouTube SIREUS channel. As I said, there is a survey will be sent out, and we very much appreciate your feedback, not only for topics, but also improvements. This is the first one, and we just like to be better and serve you better as a research community. So with that, I like to introduce the first speaker today. It's Maria Brogren, who is the head of Office of Science and Innovation at the Embassy of Sweden in the United States. And Maria is one of my biggest supporter and helper when it comes to the whole program, SIREUS program. So not only do I want to thank Maria for helping us today, but for all the help you and the embassy are doing for SIREUS in order to make it work.
So the topic of my presentation is research priorities for the US and Sweden, how these priorities overlap and how that creates increased opportunities for collaboration between researchers in Sweden and in the US, and how it also creates ways to find funding for research. First, just a couple of words about my office. It's the Office of Science and Innovation. Sweden has this kind of offices in 7 different capitals around the world, which you can see on the map, and I'm leading the DC office. And the mission or the objectives of our offices is to increase the strategic cooperation between Sweden and the country where we are posted in, US in my case, and we do that by strengthening links between key innovation and research ecosystems in our countries, and also by acquiring information, knowledge, analyze and report back to Stockholm what's going on in the US, and also by promoting Sweden as an innovative knowledge nation for investments and for competence exchange. So that's the objective of my office. And in order to give you how can we match priorities of the different countries, I will just tell you a few words about the research priorities for the US, and then the priorities of Sweden, and then how they overlap. Talking about the US, of course, you can always follow the money. So the money goes, of course, to prioritize the research areas. And this picture shows the largest research funding agencies in the US. It's agencies and departments. So as you can see, Department of Defense, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Energy, and then we have the space agency, NASA. And then on 5th place, we have the sort of more generic research foundation, the National Science Foundation, and so on. So this, of course, reflects, and this is the budget for R&D. So this is not the total budget for these agencies. That's worth noting. And also, of course, this reflects in the areas that are funded. So the interests of these funding agencies. So here you can see that national defense is the highest, and then we have healthcare and life sciences, space, and then we have the basic science, energy, natural resources and environment, agriculture and transportation. So this is the federal funding in the US. And this is how it's organized. And you don't need to know all the details of this, but it can be interesting and important also to know how the steering of the R&D funding is organized in the US. And our American listeners are probably familiar with this, but I don't think that the Swedes may know how this is organized. So in the top you have the White House, and in the White House we have the Office of Science and Innovation Policy. No, it's not the Science and this is an old, sorry, it's the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So this is a mishap here. And then we have the PCAST and the NSTC that is guiding also the priorities. And under the administration, we have the different departments and agencies that have research funding. And you can see, I want to point out some of them, which we don't have in Sweden. We don't have a DARPA, which is the defense agency for research projects, for advanced research projects within the Department of Defense. And quite recently, a couple of years ago, the Department of Defense also started a Defense Innovation Unit to take civilian innovations and sort of translate them into military use. And then we have all the civilian research, and National Institutes of Health, for example, is both a large funding organization, funding agency, but they also have a lot of intramural research. And so this is, I mean, I told you about the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And each year, before the budget year, they issue this kind of memorandum for the heads of the executive departments and agencies. So this is a very, very powerful steering tool for research funding in the US. And in this memorandum, the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy and the head of the Office of Management and Budget, they state what the administration wants in terms of research. So this is, and then the next step in the budget process is for the agencies to come with their budget asks, and they should correspond to this memorandum. So for the fiscal year 2025, these are the points that the administration points out in this memorandum. So it's research in the field of AI, it's research in the field of security and stability, it's research in the field of climate change, so meeting the climate crisis, and it's also research in the field of healthcare to create better health outcomes for everyone. So those are the 4 thematic areas in this memorandum. And then the next step is that the agencies come in with their budget asks, and then the White House checks these asks against the priorities. Of course, the agencies can also argue for other, I mean, that they need to fund other research, but this is very, very powerful. And one of the topics in the healthcare area or life science area that was also present last year and the year before that is cancer. And maybe 1.5 years ago, President Biden revitalized or relaunched the Cancer Moonshot, which is an initiative that he is really invested in to end cancer as we know it. And this has a large component, of course, of research. And the leading agency for that is the National Institute of Health. And under that institute, there's the National Cancer Institute. So they have a lot of funding for different areas, such as prevention and early detection, pediatric immunotherapy, and so on. And also which is interesting to know for the Swedish researchers is that the NIH is one of the very few US research funding agencies that can actually fund projects in other countries. So they can send money directly to Swedish researchers if you have a good project. So that is important to know. And on this picture is also a photo of Danielle Carnival, who is appointed by the president as the Cancer Moonshot Coordinator. So she coordinates activities within all government departments and agencies. Another initiative is the Department of Energy's initiative, Earthshots. So you see here that the moonshot terminology sort of spills over also to other activities. And this is just an example of what the Department of Energy funds. And this is the hydrogen Earthshot, and they aim to decrease the cost of hydrogen significantly. And one of the activities that they do and fund is regional clean hydrogen hubs. And this is more towards technological development and demonstration, but there's also research coupled to this. Just a third example on activities that sort of trickles down from this steering from the administration is the National Science Foundation. And they are sort of generic research funding organization. But 2 years ago, I think, they started a new directorate to become more, to increase focus also on innovation and translation of results into practice. And they are organized in sort of with 4 themes. And in the first theme, that is about advanced emerging industries for national and economic security, there they have a focus on AI, for example, and quantum and future mobile connectivity, 6G, for example. So this is very, I mean, sort of clear priorities for the administration. So that was some snapshots on the US priorities, and then just very briefly about the Swedish priorities. And of course, here again, you can follow the money. And the 5 here are the largest research funding organizations in Sweden. In Sweden, we have the generic Swedish Research Council, which funds more basic science. They are the largest. And then we have the Swedish Innovation Agency, Vinnova, which is more on the sort of translational and innovation side. We have the Swedish Research Council for Sustainable Development, and you can figure out what they fund. And in the same way, we have Forte, the Swedish Research Council for Health, Working Life and Welfare. And we have the Swedish Energy Agency, and those are the largest. But we also have space research, defense research, of course, and so on. And just to, I mean, this is also worth noting that the defense R&D in Sweden is relatively small compared to the civilian R&D. So this is the other way around. This is, I think, the largest difference between the Swedish and the US system. Otherwise, our priorities sort of match very well. But hopefully Sweden will join NATO very soon, and we are already ramping up defense R&D. And of course, there is, even if you are active in the civilian R&D, there will be overlap, and there are many areas of dual use. So this will spill over in funding also for sort of ordinary university researchers. Yeah, and this is just a sort of similar graph to what I showed before on the areas, which you can see here, and I will not read that out, but there are some differences, and we focus a bit more on agricultural sciences and veterinary medicine and so on. So how does this then overlap, and what kind of strategic R&D cooperation do we already have? Well, Sweden and the US, we have this agreement on scientific cooperation since 2006, and that is very general. So it says that we should try and cooperate as much as possible when it's relevant to both countries in the areas of science and technology. And it also states that we can have implementing arrangements in areas in which we would like to focus even more. And today we have one very recent and active such implementing arrangement in the area of basic energy science. And that is one of the sort of main intents of that is to increase the availability for or the possibilities for researchers to use the national research infrastructure, such as the MAX 4 in Lund in Sweden and the Department of Energy's 17 national research laboratories in the US. So this is focused on basic research, for example, high energy physics and material science and things like that, and using these infrastructures. And on the Swedish side, it's the Swedish Research Council that is responsible for this. And then we are also foreseeing a new implementing arrangement on cancer, hopefully early next year. And that will also increase possibilities for funding for joint projects in this field. And we have an old implementing arrangement on renewable energy that has not been very used, but it is there. It is a paper, you can find it on the internet. And it states that we should collaborate on renewable energy. And I would say that on the Swedish side, that would be the Swedish Energy Agency. That would be the responsible funding organization. We also have since 2005 an agreement on space cooperation. So that is the exploration and peaceful uses of outer space. And that is very active. And we have the cooperation between NASA and the Swedish National Space Agency. And they have student exchange, and they also have, I mean, many ongoing, and historically they have had many projects, for example, on sustainable aviation fuels and things like that. And there is instruments on satellites now that is an outcome of this collaboration. In the field of quantum information science, we also have a joint statement. So that's another form of sort of agreement on cooperation. And in that area, it's also mentioned that we should foster education and the development of the next generation within this field. So just to summarize, we see a lot of opportunities for bilateral collaboration in these fields: life science, digitalization, green transition, and space. And we have already some agreements in place: basic energy research, for example, cancer research is coming, quantum technology. What I haven't mentioned is critical minerals and mining, which is a field that is of great interest to both the US and Sweden. And nuclear energy is a priority of the Swedish government, the new Swedish government, and we are also discussing with the Department of Energy about collaboration in that field, and that will also have a research component. 6G, I mentioned that very briefly. The Swedish Innovation Agency Vinnova and the Swedish Research Council on the Swedish side, and the National Science Foundation on the US side is discussing how to increase collaboration in that field. So as you hear, there are a lot of opportunities, and they also overlap very well with the priorities of the SIREUS platform, which I just show here on the screen. And for the future, I think it would be very beneficial if we invited representatives of the Swedish funding organizations to tell you more about the details on how to, which programs are relevant and so on. But in the meantime, there are a lot of information on their respective websites on which programs are active. And most programs, Swedish programs only fund the Swedish side, and most US programs, except for the National Institute of Health, only fund the US side. But you can always, bring your money and collaborate. And I also want to mention that the EU, the Horizon Europe, that is also open for US participants, which bring their own funding. So there is also a possibility to sort of connect to European projects. Yes, and I will end there, and then we will have questions after Sofia's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Very interesting. And as you said, if you have questions, put it in the chat, and we will have that towards the end. And we will also send out information, survey, all the questions you have in the chat. We're trying to answer those and send out to all of you. Now I want to turn over to Sofia Sedergren-Booker, who is the president of the STARS Network, which is the Swedish Transatlantic Research and Scholars Network, which is a volunteer organization building up, helping researchers from both Sweden and America. So, Sofia, welcome to this webinar.
So as Christer mentioned, my name is Sofia Sedergren-Booker. I'm originally from Stockholm, Sweden, but I lived in the United States for almost 10 years. I am the founder of STARS Network, and I'm also a senior research analyst at Savanta, and I'm here to talk about networking and how to cultivate success in an interconnected world. So now it's a lot on Oscar's plate, but if we move to the next slide, we're going to share a short poll in the chat. So if you open the chat function by using the little speech bubble at the top of your screen, you should be able to see a poll that asks you about your current networking practices. And there are a few different ways of networking. Some people network consistently throughout the year. Others network during specific periods of the year, but maybe not consistently. Others are only networking when they're looking to make a career change. And some people don't network at all. And all of those are completely acceptable. I think the most common one is that people network when they're making a career change, and also with people that are more senior in their area of study. But it looks like we have a group of expert networkers here that are consistently networking, and that is super exciting to see, because of course leading a organization all about networking, we think that that is of course what we would like to see people doing. You can of course network both virtually and in person. In STAR's case, we do a lot of virtual networking because we have members across the entire continent of North America and in Sweden. And what I really want to focus on is kind of this broad networking. So we often look for people who can either help us right away. If you're looking for a career change, for example, you're looking for the people who are the decision makers in an organization. And we also often network with people who are more senior in our field because they might be able to help us take that next step. But it's also really important to network with peers because this builds a more long-term networking strategy, and also to network with people outside of your field, because there are opportunities for both research collaborations, but also for funding opportunities specifically for interdisciplinary research. So connecting with people not only in the same field that you're working in, but also outside of your field is very important. And the key to being a STAR networker is to be interested, not interesting. Most people prefer to talk about themselves, especially if they're very passionate about a research area that they have poured their soul into for the last however many years. They want to talk about it and they want to share what they have found. So ask questions, and through asking those questions, you can learn how you can be helpful to them. So maybe you see an article that is relevant to their area of research, or you see a webinar that might be about something that they are interested in. And by listening and learning about what they are interested in, you can also share your expertise in a way that is relevant to what they are working on, which means that they will think of you when they have a problem that they might not be able to solve, but they think, oh, that person was really helpful to me. Let me reach out to them. And that way you build a sustainable network where you help people and they help you back. And the last thing I want to touch on is some cultural considerations. So I'm now living in the United States, and here it's quite common for people to reach out and just say, hi, do you want to grab a coffee and talk about your research? And often people say, yeah, that would be great. Let's meet. In Sweden, it's not necessarily like that. Some people are more willing to do those types of connections, but there's a greater need to keep your personal life and your professional life separate. So inviting someone for a coffee could be considered kind of strange in a Swedish context. And it might be better to start those conversations in your place of work, to have a short meeting there. And of course, in Sweden, we have a culture of fika, which is just kind of taking a coffee, and you can do that in the workplace to break those initial barriers for networking. I want to share some of the success stories that we have seen within STARS. So the first one is from an American student who was studying technology here in the United States, but she was interested in relocating to Sweden. So she connected with STARS and our mentoring network, where we connect younger researchers with a more senior researcher. And we connected her with a professor in computer science in Sweden, who was able to introduce her to several connections that he had within his network in Sweden. And as a result of that, they created a new internship position for her. So she was able to go to Sweden and complete an internship for a position that wouldn't have been available had it not been for her mentoring relationship and the connections that her mentor made for her. Another success story that one of our members have shared is that they had been living abroad for a while and came back to the United States and wanted to get back into academic research. And they started out submitting a bunch of applications to different research assistant positions that they were qualified for, but they didn't get any fruitful results. So they pivoted a little bit, and instead of continuing to send out applications, they attended a journal club at the department where they were interested in working. And during that journal club, they met a professor who was actually looking for a research assistant, but they hadn't posted the position because they didn't have time. They had so much other things to do. So they were able to land a research assistant position with that professor and eventually work with them to get their PhD. The third example from one of our members is how cross-disciplinary networking can really expand our horizons, and conversations that might initially seem quite unassuming and there might not be a direct connection to one another or each other's research can really help broaden our horizons and broaden our understanding of the topic that we are researching. And through that, we can identify new collaborations and new ways to explore an area. And of course, as I mentioned before, that can also lead to new ways of receiving funding, because there are a lot of interdisciplinary funding out there that you can only apply for if you're working with someone from a different field of study. And the last example I want to share is actually my own story. I've been engaged as a volunteer with STARS for over 4 years now. And through that engagement, I have been speaking with people with experiences and knowledge bases that are very different from my own. And when I applied for a job that was focused on researching the experiences of women in research and in STEM specifically, I reached out to some of those connections I had made through STARS to ask them about their experiences, because coming from a social science background, I didn't have any direct experience being a woman in STEM, but through their experiences, I was able to showcase that in addition to my technical skills as a researcher, I also had an understanding of the area of women in STEM, despite not having any formal experience in that work. So by doing that, I was able to secure a job offer showing that I am interested in this field and go beyond just my day-to-day work. So now I want to talk a little bit more about STARS Network. So the Swedish Transatlantic Researchers and Scholars Network works with students, scientists, researchers, and scholars in North America and Sweden to help them in their professional and personal career. And we really focus on scholars who are either engaging or interested in transatlantic mobility or collaboration. And we do this in a few different ways. So we host events throughout the year, both professional development events that focuses on funding information, cross-cultural communication, tips for relocating between Sweden and North America. And this can be both in kind of a job search sense, because the labor markets look quite different, but it can also be from a more legal sense, when it comes to permits and whatnot that you need when relocating from one country to another. We also have our mentoring network, where we connect more senior researchers with younger researchers so that they can help them with their professional experience. And that is kind of one of the networking activities we do, in addition to networking events where we do like speed networking and discussion groups on transatlantic mobility or any of those topics that are relevant to our members. So we both have very short-term speed networking opportunities where we hope that people can make that initial connection and then continue to speak offline. But we also have this more formal mentoring network where young researchers are connected with someone that has more experience of what the research landscape looks like, and they can help them advance their career. Another thing that we love to do is feature our members' success stories. And we have a member feature where we shout out all the fantastic work that our members are doing. And that can be a promotion or a publication or a presentation or anything that is important in a researcher's career and kind of show all the work that they have put into their field. We also publish a monthly newsletter, and there we share some job openings in the regions that we cover, which is North America, the United States, and Canada, and then in Sweden, of course. And then we also share funding opportunities, event information, and other information that is relevant to our members.
Thank you, Sofia. I'm going to see if I could go back to this. And again, I just want to say thank you to Maria and to Sofia to help us give some insights on money. And I really appreciate, Maria, that you went through there's how it works from both the US side and the Swedish side, and also that you mentioned that there's in fact possibility for research in one country to tap into the funding mechanism in the other. Although it's pretty new, should I say, concept, but it's coming that way. If you have any questions, just shoot them. I have a couple of follow-up questions to Maria and to Sofia to start off, but if you have questions, put them in the chat and we will try to answer those. So for you, Maria, you mentioned that NATO and Sweden, which is a hot topic. How do you think that would be even more joint funding when it comes to NATO defense security? Is there anything that your view on that? That American DoD money might flow into research in Sweden? Is that just a dream, or is that could be a possibility?
There is actually already possibilities to get DARPA funding for research in Sweden. And DARPA, they have a newsletter where they send out funding possibilities quite often. So you can sign up to get those newsletters. And I mean, DARPA, they have many sort of great innovations stem from DARPA research. So it's not only for military purposes. There's often sort of widespread use of innovations from DARPA. So that's already a possibility. But I mean, what I was speaking about is that I mean, Sweden is increasing our budget for defense in total, but also for defense research. And the Swedish Minister for Defense was here in the US last week and visiting, for example, DARPA and the Defense Innovation Unit to learn from them. So we will probably see more activities in that field in Sweden also.
Thank you, Maria. And you also mentioned space, that we already have a collaboration in space. And I think that in a couple of weeks from now, we have another minister or a secretary from Sweden coming over for overseeing the space program down in Florida, I think. I don't know if you have any public, but there is interest there at least.
Yeah, and also there is a strong connection between, I mean, space and science, of course. And in Sweden, the Swedish Minister for Research and Education is also the Minister for Space. So that's how close the connection is.
Perfect. No, thank you so much. And Sofia, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your members' experience. One thing that you didn't disclose is how did you come up with this? Because it seemed to be that there's a number of in your members that really enjoy it and use it for their further development. How did you come up with this, and how many members do you have today, roughly?
So when I graduated from my master's program in political science here in the United States, I wanted to connect with more Swedes. I was living in New York City, and there's quite a lot of Swedish people living there as well, but it's not always easy to find them because Swedes have a tendency to integrate really well in their new country. So it's not obvious who they are. But I connected with EuroAccess North America, which is an organization that works with opportunities between the EU and North America. And they said that they had these diaspora networks for other countries, but they didn't have one for Sweden. So I thought that that would be a great way to connect with other Swedes, and particularly people who are interested in research and higher education. So I founded STARS in 2019, and to kind of make those connections, and we have members in all 3 regions, so in the United States, in Canada, and in Sweden, who either have relocated from one country to another or are interested in those types of opportunities. And we currently have about 250 members in those 3 regions, and continue to kind of work to make sure that we offer information and programs that are relevant to them. And I think one of the most powerful things with STARS is that we have researchers at all levels, so from students and postdocs up to people who have 20 plus years of experience in their field, which gives a great opportunity to advance in your career and kind of talk with people with different experiences and knowledge bases, regardless of what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Sofia, for I guess on behalf of all the research about Swedish and American, for coming up with the idea and being consistent and just working hard to create something. So I think that it's very well done. Maria, if I'm a researcher in Sweden or in the US, I want to see what's cooking, so to speak. I know that you're sending out, or your organization sending out a newsletter on a regular basis. How can I get onto that list? Because that's very interesting newsletter that I don't think if you want to mention, because that's a lot of information there.
My office sends out a newsletter every month. It is in Swedish. It is sort of the target audience is mainly, the government offices, the funding agencies, but also universities. And you can sign up if you get hold of one of the newsletters. There is a link and you can sign up. But I also quite regularly post them on Twitter and my LinkedIn, and we can send out. I think we can put the link where you sign up in the sort of documentation from this webinar.
Perfect. No, thank you so much. And I haven't got any question yet, so I guess you are a bit shy to I guess from a cultural considerations, Sofia, I guess we have a lot of Swedish researchers that are shy to ask questions, correct? Is that how I should interpret that lesson?
It could be, yeah. I mean, it's always
anyway, that we appreciate your time. I'm going to just have a wrap up here in a second, but if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And as I mentioned, we are recording it, we edit it, so it will be on the YouTube, our SIREUS channel on YouTube. Before, there's a couple of things I want to mention, because Maria, you mentioned that the Swedish funding, and yes, we have been in contact with the Swedish funding organizations to be part of this SIREUS Research Forum down the road. We are trying to build this kind of vehicle, or build a forum for research forums. So whatever you want to have as a researcher, let us know, both Swedish and American researchers, and we will do our utmost to help to cover those topics down the road. I also want to, I guess, market or say that if you haven't been on the SIREUS website, please do so. There is a number of things that is very interesting. There's also a news section, and we use that on social media. SIREUS is here to help intensify the collaboration, but already today and many years, there's been a lot of collaboration between a US university and a Swedish university, and we are trying to capture those on in a newsletter kind of thing, on news stories. And there is a number, I think we have 4 or 5 different right now, and we are covering more as we speak. So please visit the website and go back there, because we are putting out quite a lot of information that plan to help you guys out there. We are also active in social media, same as Sofia said, on the SIREUS, everything the SIREUS. So please join us there as well. The plan for the next topic is the preliminary January 24th. We will send out information to you. Preliminary January 24th for the second of this webinar series at 10 a.m. Eastern, 4 o'clock Swedish or Central European time. The topic is Introduction to Technology Transfer in the US. And that might see, what is that maybe? Well, if you're researching in Sweden, doing a fantastic research, and it's with the patent, and then you find a colleague in the US that say, oh, this is pretty cool, how can we work together? The thing is that it's totally different systems. So this is supposed to help both a US researcher and a Swedish researcher to understand the system. So in the US, and I'm not going to preempt the presentation, but it's a different system, and it's very useful to understand what is my colleague in the US or my colleague in Sweden, what is their rules, how do I do this, who owns the IP, and how do I do the next step. So Introduction to Technology Transfer in the US will most likely be the next topic, and we will send it out. So if I don't have any other questions here, I want to thank Maria so much for all the work that you have been doing with SIREUS and all the embassy staff or your colleagues, and also SAC, Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, where SIREUS is part of. We couldn't have been doing this without the SAC organization. And certainly Sofia, thank you so much for jumping on the call today and tell us more about the networking. So join the SARS network, as Sofia said. It will be in the thank you letter to all of you guys. And also Maria, thank you for the presentation, also for your Swedish newsletter, but I find it very useful, and it might be an opportunity for American research to learn Swedish in order to get all the insights of the newsletter from Maria. So with that, I just want to say thank you all. Have a great rest of the day, week, and when a couple of weeks from now, happy holidays to all of you out there, and see you next time in January. Take care.